Hi guys, it's Steffi and I'm back to do my August wrap-up video. And like last month, I read way too many books because I have 21 books to show you, so I'm going to do this really quickly. I'm thinking for next month, if I get to about 6 or 7 books before the middle of September, I will probably do a mid-month wrap-up because this is just slightly ridiculous. Not that I'm complaining because I'm reading. 21 books is a lot. The first book I read in September was Peter Pan by J.M. Barrie. It's a classic. I've never read it before. I struggled to get through this, and I think I've said this before, I struggle to get through classics. I think it's just the writing, and it's not super fast-paced, and I really like super fast-paced books. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. Great read. Very happy that I did actually read it, but it was just a little bit slow for me. Okay, next up I read Cruel Crown by Victoria Aveyard, which is the 2 prequel novellas from the Red Queen series. I gave 3 out of 5 stars. I really liked the novella about Corianne, who is Cal's mother, but the Captain Farley story I felt dragged a lot, and I mean that one was the majority of how much. Yeah, so I enjoyed it. Look, I liked seeing kind of where everyone came from, but yeah, it was only a 3-star read for me. Next, I read ILLUMINAE by Amy Kaufman and KRISTOFF, and I absolutely loved this book. This was a 5-star read for me. I loved the format. To be honest, I was never that worried about the format. I think I said I was worried, but I wasn't, because I really like the interesting format that this book takes. But yeah, I mean, this was just fantastic to read, and I really felt that I got to know the characters, even though we don't actually get to see them interact together except through emails and instant messages and all that sort of thing. And I love the space opera-ness of this book, and I love the artificial intelligence, and I just thought it was wonderful. So if you haven't read it, I really, really recommend you do. I finally finished up Everything I Know About Writing by John Marsden, which I picked up last year, and it's basically John Marsden's book on writing. And for those of you in Australia who are familiar, John Marsden is a really famous author. He's also an educator here in Australia, and this book is just full of tips and tricks to improve your writing style. And I love at the back, the whole way through, he's talking about writing prompts and he's referencing other works. And one of the things I really loved at the back of the book is he includes a whole series of writing prompts that are scattered throughout the book, but there's also extra ones, and I thought that was really fantastic. Next up, I finished True Grit by GRYLLS, which is a collection of short stories about, survival stories. So different people who survived really interesting events in their life, and explorers and all that sort of thing. This one I gave 3 out of 5 stars. Some of the stories I found really, really interesting. People I'd never heard of. Some I had heard of. For the most part, it was just okay. I'm not really a non-fiction reader. I'll admit that off the bat. But I had this book lying around and I thought, well, I better read it, and yeah, so I have, so 3 out of 5 stars. Then I read Glass Sword by Victoria Aveyard, which is the second book in the Red Queen series. Again, this book I gave about 3.5 out of 5 stars. I do like the series. It's not the best series out there. There were parts in this that I felt really, really dragged, and times when I really, really just wanted to slap some of the characters over the back of the head and say, what the hell are you doing? That's not necessarily a bad thing when you're reading, because it means you're invested in the characters, right? I don't know, 3.5 out of 5 stars. I am curious to see where Victoria Aveyard takes this series. Yeah, that's all I can say. It's not the best thing I've read, but I do want to see what happens, so I suppose that's a good thing. Next, I read The Magicians by Lev Grossman. Later in the month, I actually went and saw Lev Grossman, so I wanted to read this before I went and saw him speak. I liked this book. I did. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I felt the beginning of the story. There were some really interesting bits, and there were some bits that dragged, and there were times when I really wanted to shake some of the characters, because honestly, some of the characters are so self-centered, but I don't find that as to be a negative. I actually think that's quite a good thing, because I felt something for the characters and I really wanted them to act like grown-ups, and they really don't act like grown-ups in this. So since I finished the book, I was getting frustrated halfway through the book, and then we hit the second half of the book, and I won't spoil it for people who haven't read it, but there is the element of a new world that takes place. And once I hit that, I read right through to the end, and I thought that sort of redeemed itself a little bit. And I do really want to read the next 2 books in this series just to see what actually happens. And since having seen Lev Grossman speak and hearing about his writing process and how the book and the series came together, I am really curious. So even though it was only 3.5 stars, I really I'm interested in seeing where this series goes. Next up, I read Zenith by Sasha Ellsberg, and oh god, I've forgotten the second author. I'll put it on the screen. I gave it 2.5 out of 5 stars. I actually didn't feel like I connected to the characters, which is not a negative. I've heard that the book's been picked up to be physically published as an actual book in its entirety, and I think that if I read that, I think I'll find it to be a lot better. I'm not a huge fan of serialized things, and I didn't realize that going into it. I thought it was part one of a series, not part one of a book. I don't know. I didn't necessarily connect to the characters in that particular format. So I'm hoping that once the book comes out, I'm going to give it another shot and I'm going to give it a proper read, and then I'll give you guys another review. So I did read Zenith. It wasn't terrible, but it wasn't the best thing I read this month. Then I read Replica by Lauren Oliver, which I read as an ebook. It was sent to me by the publisher, and I really enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. If you're not familiar with the book, it is a story about 2 characters. It's told from 2 perspectives. So one half of the book is told from Gemma's perspective and one half is told from Lara's perspective. I have to admit, I preferred Lara's story to Gemma's story. I just thought she was a more interesting character, and the way that she viewed the world was really interesting. I have done a review for it on my blog. I will leave the link for that down below so you can check it out, and it'll give you more details about how I felt about that particular book. Then I read The Fearless Traveler's Guide to Wicked Places. Again, that was an ebook that was sent to me by the publishers to review. I do have a review for it on my blog, and I'll link that one down below as well. It's a middle grade fiction book, and it has witches and a really wacky dream world, which I thought was really interesting. I did give it, what did I give it? 3 out of 5 stars. It's not the best middle grade fiction book I've ever read. There were aspects of it that I felt just were a little bit underdeveloped for my particular taste, but that's not necessarily to say that it is for anyone else. And yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Children of Icarus by Kaylin Smith, and that book reminds me a lot of The Maze Runner. It is about a group of teenagers who are sent into this maze that a labyrinth, I should say, not a maze, it's called a labyrinth that surrounds a city. There is the hint of this Icarus myth in there, and this city is supposedly built over the top of the tomb of Icarus, and these people send their teenagers out to try and find heaven, basically. So if they make it through the maze, they ascend and they become angels. And of course, that's not the case. And this book is quite violent, and I wasn't necessarily expecting it to be as violent as it is, which is not a problem. I don't have an issue with that. But I didn't know that going into it. I mean, I gave Children of Icarus 3 out of 5 stars. It wasn't the best for me. There was a lot of unanswered questions. I don't know if this is going to be a series. If it is, then my review might change as more books come out, because I felt that it ended in a really awkward spot. Like, there was a conclusion, and it was a I wouldn't say it was a clear conclusion, but it was a conclusion. But there was just so many things left unanswered. And I don't mind things being left unanswered and, thinking about what's going on, but at the same time, I felt that it was a bit too open-ended for my particular tastes. But if you like angel myths and you like mythology and you like things like The Maze Runner, then that's definitely your kind of book. Then I read The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness, which I know is a really popular, really famous book, which I've had sitting on my shelf for about, 8 years. And I have to say, I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars. Yeah, there was some things that I had issues with in this book, and I'm not going to go into them because there'd be spoilers. If you want to know, you can ask me down below, but I did give it 3 out of 5 stars. I found it hard to read, and I found it hard to relate to the characters in this book. If you want to know more, let me know in the comments and I'll go into it in more detail. But yeah, 3 out of 5 stars. After The Knife of Never Let Go, I read Eon and Iona, which are by Alison Goodman. It's a duology, and it is about dragons and mythology, and it's fantastic. And I gave Eon 4 out of 5 stars, and then I gave Iona 5 out of 5 stars. I read half of Eon in one day, then I finished Eon the next day, and I read Iona all in one sitting. Like, I read it straight through. I was so ready just to find out what happens to these characters. And if you haven't read it, it's amazing. And if you like dragons, I suggest you read it. A really great series. And now I'm really curious to check out some of Alison Goodman's other works. And I didn't realize she's a Melbourne author, which is awesome. After the duology, I read Nevernight by KRISTOFF, which is an insanely popular book here on YouTube. I enjoyed it. I won't say that I didn't. I did find it really hard to get through, and I was having to read it in small chunks. And I think I needed to have large chunks to sit through and just plow through parts of it, because I found the beginning of it to be a little bit slow, which is not a criticism. I think it was great world building and whatnot, but I had to get through that to really get hooked in the second half of the book. I gave Nevernight 4 out of 5 stars. I mean, I love this cover. Black, red and white. I love that combination, and I think this is gorgeous. I prefer this to, I think, the US cover. I think this one is prettier. But yes, I did enjoy this, and I thought I thought the School for Assassins was really interestingly and well done, because parts of it was kind of creepy, as you would expect from a School of Assassins, but KRISTOFF didn't shy away from that, so I liked it. Then I read Six of Crows. Now, if you've seen my Bout of Books vlogs, you'll have seen the next couple of books, but I'll just go through them really quickly. So I read Six of Crows by Leigh Bardugo. Again, I found this really slow to get into. I know it's a really popular book here on BookTube as well. I did enjoy it, and I am curious to see what happens in Crooked Kingdom when that's released, and I am actually really curious to read the rest of the Grisha novels. I gave Six of Crows 4 out of 5 stars. Then I read another ebook. It was the Ferryman Institute by Colin, insert last name here because I can't pronounce it and I don't want to butcher anyone's last names. This book I really, really enjoyed. I think I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And it's the story of a ferryman, like in the myths, the ferryman who ferry the soul of the dead to the underworld. And set in a modern day. I really like the characters. It wasn't perfect and there are definitely aspects of it that I have issues with, but in terms of storytelling and pace and engagement, I did really enjoy this book. Then I read Mortal Coil in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. I think this is book 5. Book 5. Please tell me it's book 5. I always get this mixed up. Yes, it's book 5. And it's huge. But I'm getting there. I'm ploughing my way through this series. I gave this one 4 out of 5 stars. I'm really curious to see where the characters go. I want to read and see what happens for myself. Then I read Stealing Snow, which is also an ebook, and I gave it about 3 out of 5 stars. I'm almost tempted to take that down to a 2.5 because I didn't really enjoy it. It's sort of a Snow Queen retelling, except I really didn't like the main character. And I mean, I've read books where I haven't liked the main character before, but I didn't even feel connections to the other side characters. I felt that the book itself just introduced too many things really quickly, so you didn't really feel like you got to know the characters. Again, my personal opinion, but that wasn't my favourite read of the month, and it's one that I sort of read, and I did my review, and I'll leave that down below if you want to find out more about it. And the last book I read in August was You Know Me Well by Nina LaCour and David Levithan, and I've never read anything by these two authors, and I really loved this book. I'm not a huge fan of contemporary books. I tend to stick to fantasy, but lately I have found myself sort of picking up a few little contemporary books just to have a break because I'm reading so much. So I did really like this book. I gave this book 4 out of 5 stars and I highly recommend it. Just a fun read and it takes place over the course of a week, I think, and it's great. I enjoyed it. So that is everything that I read in the month of August. I don't think I can even get this all in the one screen. Oh, there we go. All of my books, plus ebooks. Woohoo! So that is everything I read this month. Stay tuned for my September TBR. I know that these are a little bit late because it was nuts last week. But thank you very much for watching. I hope that wherever you are in the world, you're having a wonderful day, and I'll see you guys next time. Happy reading!